What an incredibly vexing problem. Screwed up my live stream. But that's all right. I'm here in this most unimpressive little segment of the High Line. Am I live now at all? Hopefully, I am. This equipment does not always cooperate. But you know, it's July 22nd, 2024. Am I even live? Is this thing doing anything? Somebody doesn't want people to hear about whatever it is that I have to say, it seems. I guess I'm live. The thing that's interesting about today, the President of the United States, or at least the brain-dead moron who's pretending to be that, hasn't been seen publicly in 5 days. People have been asking if he's even alive. We had Laura Loomer, maybe it was a week ago, she had some story about some medical emergency for Dumb Joe on board Air Force One, and everyone's like, no, that's wrong. I forget the details of that, but Laura had some pretty compelling evidence. Maybe the press corps had been prevented from entering the plane or something like that. It was certainly, I mean, Laura doesn't just put stuff out there. Sometimes she states opinions that people object to, but when she's putting out facts, they're usually right. She's been a little bit emotional on the Trump assassination, and I've seen her put out some stuff like she was repeating that claim that's been big on the news about crooks having encrypted overseas accounts. If people were watching the congressional hearing that just ended a few minutes ago, that was an astonishing thing. Kimberly Cheadle, the director of the Secret Service, not only can't operate the Secret Service, she's just a dunce. She knows less about what's going on with the Donald Trump assassination attempt than a large array of people who have been reporting on it online. I would include myself in that. Obviously, John Cullen, many other people are, you know, the Secret Service director said she was not even aware of eyewitness testimony that there was a second shooter on the water tower. There were a few congressional reps who asked her about the water tower. Obviously, they asked her about how the guy got onto the building. I found it interesting that American Glass Research, the building that the alleged sniper perched upon to aim at President Trump, everybody in Congress referred to it as AGR. Nobody called it American Glass Research. And the other thing that I found interesting, they were really proud of themselves talking about how this was a bipartisan effort. Doesn't Hudson Yards remind you of New Detroit from the original RoboCop movie? I saw a dude yesterday wearing a king's crown, a cape, an original, you know, the 1986 RoboCop or 85, original RoboCop t-shirt, and like these big white lace-up boots. Crazy. But they said they were super proud of themselves that this was a bipartisan thing. The only bipartisan thing that they agreed upon was that basically the director of the Secret Service has got to be kicked out. Everybody there said that she's incompetent and should be fired. And it's true, it doesn't seem like she prepared for this at all. Everything she said, oh, you gotta ask the FBI about that, I'll have to check, I'll have to ask. She really didn't even seem to review any aspect of anything. I mean, it's been 9 days, so obviously there's still an investigation going on. Why do they just have these trains running and not going anywhere? You hear the diesel engine. So it's been 9 days. Now, obviously, on the one hand, that's not a lot of time. I don't imagine that you would solve a complicated crime like this in 9 days. But if you were the director of the agency that's, I mean, she's saying there was a failure and it's basically her fault. And she just doesn't seem to know any of the details about what happened that day. They asked her how many shell casings were found on the roof of American Glass Research, although they called it AGR. And she said the FBI told her, but she doesn't want to talk about it. And it's like, wait, what? how, I guess she's not compelled to answer the questions, or, I mean, isn't she? What's the point in having her there if she's not compelled to answer the questions? But she said that she met with Christopher Wray of the FBI, and he told her how many shells. You know, the FBI is in the course of investigating this, so that means the FBI is in the course of covering the whole thing up. So when I just checked before I went live, and Lauren Boebert was asking for proof of life with regard to Joe Biden, I think it's a reasonable request, because there were a lot of questions about the signature on that letter. It wasn't on White House letterhead, it wasn't on Joe Biden, you know, bunny ears stationery, and people were pointing out certain differences in the signature, you know, historical examples of Joe Biden's signature and what we've got right there. I think we have more construction going on in this. Remember, this is going to be the other part of Hudson Yards, where it was going to be low-income housing built on top of all these trains. So I guess they're doing that. It looks like they have some big gigantic drills here or something. But I don't know. I don't think Joe Biden has appeared yet. And people are speculating that he might be dead. If that's true, that's insane. How do they just not tell us, and not even, you know, there's no president right now if that's the case? Seems like that would be a violation of something. But just back to that hearing for a second. Lauren Boebert did something pretty weird at the hearing. I kind of like Lauren Boebert. She smiled at me in a hearing one time, and I felt bad for her when she got into all that trouble going on a date, and somebody had a night vision thing checking out her date. That was pretty weird. Anyway, the thing she did that I didn't like is that she, even Republicans and people who agreed with everything that was going on, they're talking about these. That's the smart drive head. That's the biggest drill I've seen today. Interesting. Not every day that you see that. But Lauren Boebert was saying, oh, how can this 20-year-old kid be allowed to use encrypted apps? Somebody else said, oh my God, encrypted apps. And they're hosted in Belgium and Germany, and so there's going to be foreign involvement. It was so stupid. I mean, remember, congressional representatives in some cases are just regular people who get elected to Congress. I remember when Marjorie Taylor Greene won, she was sending me DMs on Twitter back when Crowdsource the Truth had, you know, 120,000 subscribers on YouTube, and actually bigger on Twitter now than, well, on X, than I was ever able to grow to on the original Twitter. Again, I'm not convinced that that's because Elon Musk is the nicest guy in the world, who, just out of the benevolence of his 200 billionaire heart, wants everybody to have free speech. I think that might not be completely true. I think Elon Musk has uses for Twitter X pertaining to training large language models for AI applications in the future, maybe making political horse trading deals with people like Ron DeSantis, who you might recall he was able to do a campaign announcement event that really coincided nicely with some legislation in Florida that pertains to insurance for rockets that explode. You can't sue people if they blow up rockets in Florida, or something like that. What I'm getting at is, we don't really know what would have happened if Donald Trump had not avoided that assassin's bullet. I expect, because a lot of people are trying to figure out, like, well, how did they expect to convince people of this or that? I believe what they expected was that Donald Trump was going to be killed. There'd be no viable candidate on the Republican side, and then they would just, you know, shove Kamala Harris or whoever they're ultimately going to run there, Hillary or Michelle Obama, whatever they're going to do. they would have just made a lot of hullabaloo about that. None of us would have been too excited about Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or Mike Pompeo or whoever they would have put there. And then, see, it doesn't even matter if we all would have said, okay, fine, we're going to bite our tongue and vote for whoever. They would have just cheated again. And then you wouldn't be able to say, hey, wait a minute, that's an obvious lie. Because if they try to do this to Trump, I think it's clear even a blind man could see. I told Charles this the other day. I feel like the Democrats, if they got like Jesus Christ and maybe Elvis as the vice president, you might be able to beat Trump. But I don't think they're going to get those guys. And it's just, there's no way he's losing. So they have a problem now, but that's not even their biggest problem. That's insane, is that the President of the United States, there are like credible questions flying as to whether the guy is alive or dead. And that's not even the biggest news happening right now. So everybody's focused on Crooks. I do not believe that was Crooks on the roof. Now, did people have an opportunity? We got these tours that like to stop and jam up the whole place. Don't jam up the High Line, okay? Visit, but don't screw the place up. So anyway, way back there. She was unaware of eyewitness testimony of a second shooter on the water tower. That's astounding. There were so many things that they were talking about that make it clear that people in Congress are looking at what we're talking about. Second shooter, third shooter. And then there's other people who are like, oh, yeah, that's a conspiracy theory. It's like, I don't understand. How can you look at the fact pattern of what just went on in Butler, Pennsylvania, and consider anything a conspiracy theory? It seems quite obvious that a number of really strange things happened. This was something interesting that came up. If you haven't had a chance to see this congressional hearing that just ended, I really recommend that people watch it. Some of the things that come up are super subtle and they go by without you even noticing. For instance, they said that this Donald Trump rally was announced by Donald Trump on July 3rd. July 3rd. So that's only 10 days before it happened. That means all of this stuff had to come together super quickly. It almost makes me want to explore the possibility of who planned this rally for Donald Trump. Who selected Butler, Pennsylvania? Who decided that this, what's it called? Butler Farms, this fairgrounds, who decided on that with the advanced glass research right there? Like, it almost feels like somebody who was in on this would have had to set that up, because in addition to the implausible nature of a 20-year-old guy, I mean, I'm not denying that there could be a 20-year-old guy who's an expert at flying drones. In fact, when I was the CEO of AeroCine, the guy that we hired as the pilot was, I don't even think he was 20 at the time that we hired him. He might have been 19, but he was like the Swedish, he was some kind of drone champion. This kid was amazing. I mean, he would get into a zone. He was flying like $250,000 worth of stuff on this helicopter over water, through archways and hotels in Dubai. The kid was amazing. But in other words, this was somebody who from like the age of like 8 every day was doing nothing but flying drones. And what I'm getting at is when you're that young and you concentrate your skill set on something like that, maybe you're great at baseball, maybe you're an awesome drummer, super duper piano player, artist, whatever. But at that young age, someone who is super good at something is generally very focused on it. I just find it odd that somebody 20 would have all of these skills that seem more like the skills that you would acquire if you were maybe, I don't know, in Iraq or Afghanistan or Ukraine, somewhere where these kind of like special operator guys get involved and they know everything about explosives and body armor and tactical whatever. I mean, look, just like any old body can pick up a cell phone and do a live stream. Maybe what I'm doing is somewhat more complicated. You saw how we just had some technical problems back there. It's way different than doing, let's say, a stereoscopic shoot out of a helicopter on a mountain for Light the Wick or something like that. That's probably an example of some of the most extreme filmmaking that I've been involved in. And you need a lot of skills for that to come off at all, right? So sort of getting, in terms of making a video, 80% of the people can probably get 80% of the way there just with basic knowledge. But when you want to get into something really complicated, sophisticated, specialized, that cannot fail, you need to be an expert in what you're doing. And even then, it's a challenge, because these types of complicated, coordinated things that involve machines and people and timing and physics and weather, there are literally an unlimited number of things that can go wrong. So anytime, if I just told you, oh yeah, here's a video that won the ESPN, best 3D, whatever, and it's just some guy shot it on his cell phone, it doesn't work that way. No, we had to prepare for weeks with equipment that we spent years refining and developing, experts in every aspect of the skiing, the camera stuff, the helicopter stuff, the camera stabilization stuff. If one person screwed up one thing that they were supposed to do, the whole thing goes out the window. So the whole, how did they miss? Well, I mean, expert shooters would tell you, and I'm not that, I don't claim to be that. The only reference I've made to any shooting that I've done with John Cullen was this trip we made out to the desert years ago, and I only bring it up to say that I'm an amateur shooter. That was my first time ever doing it, and even at 300 yards, I was able to hit the target. That doesn't mean that anybody could do that, but in other words, if I tried to do that and the first 3 years I was doing it, I could get nowhere near it, it gives people some idea of the degree of difficulty. But the point, I was just trying to gauge in my own mind that distance. But you got to understand, when I'm doing that, I'm sitting out there in the desert. It's dead quiet. We're not doing anything illegal. Nobody is aiming a gun at me. There's no pressure on me whatsoever. I could take 5 minutes to line up and take that shot if I want. It's much different than knowing that there's snipers all around, there's people down below screaming, that there's a guy up there, you're about to do something that you're gonna kill a person, you're gonna change the course of history. I can't imagine what's running through the person who's doing that, what's running through their mind. I mean, they must be a psychopath. I saw this interview with a mafia hitman who was a former associate of Valerie Caproni. I was stunned at the degree of criminality that the FBI and Valerie Caproni personally are able to look the other way on to advance whatever it is that you're trying to advance. If you're using, if you've murdered 36 people, does that make you a serial killer, a mass murderer? I don't know. I guess neither of those, because a hitman, a serial killer, I guess, is defined by being psychotic and having no purpose. I don't know how to define this, but obviously, a hitman is somebody, they don't care about the life they're taking, but they're motivated by money. So from a logic standpoint, that makes sense. Somebody who goes and kills somebody they don't know without even being paid for it, it's difficult to even understand the motivation. I'm not saying I understand the motivation of killing somebody for money, but that's at least the explanation. You've got to be a psychopath to get involved with that, but you just take away that financial incentive, and then what is it even there? Point is, Caproni says, well, yeah, this guy murdered 36 people, but we're going to work with him to catch other criminals. It's like, what worse criminal are you? If you've got the 36-time murderer, just lock him in jail. I get the idea of plucking the low-level drug dealer off the street to turn him into an informant and find out who's higher up on the chain. But the guy who's personally murdered 36 people, I have a real issue with that guy becoming an informant. But anyway, Ed Bradley was interviewing this guy in about 1999 on 60 Minutes in jail, and just asking him, how did you feel about killing these people? And he said, look, I didn't know those people, it's just business, somebody put a hit on them and I did it. That was it. Then later in the call, when he got into in the interview. He's in jail interviewing the guy. And he started asking him about how when he turned into a state's witness and became an informant for the FBI, started talking about his daughter and his wife didn't want him to do that because their whole entire community turned against him and everybody thought he was a rat and blah, blah, blah. And he started crying when he spoke about losing touch with his daughter. And because the deal with the FBI went south and he was in jail, obviously, for this interview with Ed Bradley. But it was interesting and very selfish how this guy was crying. Wait, what's going on here? Why is this closed? High attention, what does it say? Closed construction. All right, well, I guess that's it for the walk on the High Line. But it was just interesting. There's something broken in that guy's brain. I mean, to him, the notion that he can never speak to his daughter again, he's crying like a baby. But he's going to kill 36 people, none of their daughters or sons or wives or husbands or parents are ever speaking to them again, and he just absolutely doesn't care. So I think you've got to be a psychopath, and once we start there, maybe we gain a better understanding, because we still really don't know who pulled the trigger. I'm a little disappointed that even some of our best internet sleuths have sort of, they've fallen into the zone of just referring to the shooter as Crooks. And there's just no evidence that Crooks was on the roof at American Glass Research. So back to the hearing. Why did nobody in Congress want to refer to the thing as American Glass Research? Why did more than one, even Republican Congress member, they kept talking about these encrypted apps. They got a real bug up their collective ass about encrypted apps. I wish C-SPAN would put up the name of the congressperson who's speaking, because you can't always see that little card and it's tough to remember all their names. But one Republican representative was asking Cheadle about her own use of encrypted apps, and she said she does use them to communicate with colleagues. The guy almost had her trapped, but then he screwed it up, because he got her to admit that she's using encrypted apps on her personal phone to communicate with colleagues, and he got her to admit something about the government phones issued to the Secret Service. Sometimes, she said, when they travel overseas, they don't have the same texting capabilities that their personal phones have. And so she was using encrypted apps to communicate with colleagues. None of this was directly said. This was all sort of said collectively together. And the mistake that the perhaps non-attorney congressional rep made was that when he thought he had her trapped in saying something she shouldn't have said, like, yeah, I'm using encrypted apps to communicate with colleagues on a non-government phone. He thought he had another Hillary Clinton email server issue on his hands. He went into a whole other line of questioning, and then he said he thinks he wants to start an investigation into her use of encrypted apps. And she said, just to clarify, she's communicating with colleagues on her personal phone about personal business, not about official government business. So I think she dodged a bullet on that, pardon the pun. But Comer, when he wrapped up, he made a point of saying that basically no question asked of her had been answered. And Luna also ripped into Cheadle, saying that she's basically going to be fired if she doesn't resign, like today. I think she's going to be fired. And they said that Congress has lost confidence in her. Actually, no, Raskin said that, which was even more damning because he's supposed to be her buddy. But Raskin said that Congress has lost confidence in her to direct the Secret Service. So that seemed bad. She also said that she had less information on who was on the roof of American Glass Research than I did. I had a phone call this morning with, I believe he's a sergeant, Detective Patrick Young. He's with the Beaver County ESU. I think that means Emergency Services Unit. That encompasses EMT and SWAT. And so I guess what happens is not every small town police department can afford a SWAT team, and perhaps Butler County is one of those towns, so they bring in this guy and the SWAT team. And we heard that local law enforcement had a counter sniper SWAT team inside Advanced Glass Research. Now there was a capture that I wanted to do to show everybody this video on the phone, and I forgot to do it. But that's all right. Let me play this phone call that I had if anybody missed my phone call with the detective. Here it is.
Detective Young.
Detective Young, this is Jason Goodman. How are you, sir?
Good.
I'm calling, I don't know if you've heard about this, but I believe yesterday Senator Ron Johnson released a report on the preliminary findings of an investigation conducted by his office, in which he states that members of the SWAT team from Beaver County, which I believe is under your leadership, were on the roof at American Glass Research and photographed the dead suspect. And according to this report, the SWAT operators were instructed by an unknown individual in a gray suit to send the photographs to an ATF agent with a Philadelphia cell phone number. And I was calling, first of all, to ask if you can confirm the statements made in this report, and secondarily to ask, first of all, if that's standard for the SWAT operators to just photograph deceased suspects with their cell phones, or if it would be more normal for the police to send a photography unit. And either way that answer goes, is it possible for me to do a FOIA request or some other similar information request to obtain the original photograph? Because my expertise in digital photography, which is quite extensive, tells me that the image that was ultimately released of the shooter on the roof, which was not released through an official press release of Beaver County or Butler County. This was just leaked on the internet through 4chan or X.com or something like that. And is it possible, my expertise tells me that that photo is not the original photo from the phone. It's not presented in the proper aspect ratio. It doesn't have the same compression characteristics that a modern iPhone or Android phone or even a professional camera would have. And so there's, with this senator's report, the photographs of this unknown person in the gray suit, this odd request to send the image to the ATF, there's a lot of evidence that the photograph that was leaked to the internet of this deceased suspect on the roof has been altered in some way. Are you able to answer any of these questions, Detective?
Who is your news agency you represent?
I'm an independent journalist. I have my own agency called Crowdsource the Truth. There's no particular agency that I represent, but I've been on Fox News, been in the New York Times.
Okay. So the only thing I will tell you is our team is in communication with investigating entities, including congressional members, and that's about the extent I can give right now.
Okay.
So that's where we stand, unfortunately, but I appreciate your due diligence.
Yeah, no problem. So is that a confirmation that you did speak that there were Beaver County SWAT on the roof of American Glass on July 13th?
I'm just going to stick with the fact that we're in communication with those investigative bodies right now.
Mm-hmm. Is it standard procedure, just a general question, not about the specific investigation, is it standard procedure for SWAT operators to photograph, and would a photograph taken by a SWAT operator be considered official police evidence, or is it more along the lines of a police photographer would go there and photograph the crime scene. How does that normally work?
Depends on the situation.
So if a SWAT operator took a picture of a suspect, that could in fact be official police evidence?
If any police officer took a photo, it would be official police evidence.
Got it. And is it possible to do a FOIA request to your office or some other office to obtain the original photo taken by that officer on? I mean, obviously the photo was taken by law enforcement on the roof. No journalists had access to the roof, and we can tell by the lensing of the photograph and the proximity to the subject, it had to be taken by someone on the roof, which we only have police and people wearing military fatigues and this unknown individual in the gray suit. Are you familiar with the guy in the gray suit?
Again, I can't really comment on that, but you can certainly do a FOIA request. It would be through Beaver County.
Beaver County, I'll do a FOIA request. And I see that you're a veteran, sir. Thank you for your sacrifice and your work. Was this Iraq or Afghanistan where you were?
Iraq.
Uh-huh. When were you there?
0405 and 0809.
I'm glad you weren't injured. I hope you weren't.
Just my pride.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry to hear you say that, and I appreciate the sacrifices you've made.
No worries, and I appreciate what you guys do. And sorry I can't comment more.
I understand. I appreciate it. I do.
We're just trying to do the right thing by all the investigators.
Thank you, Detective. Have a nice day. It was pretty polite of him to speak to me. I don't think he needed to do that. He wasn't very forthcoming, of course, but, you know, he's involved in the investigation, and he's not a public information officer, so it's maybe even surprising that he said that much. It was good for me to listen to it again. So he's in Iraq 2004, 2005, and then 2008 to 2009. I wonder who else was there. People told me that picture of him, he looks like he's some kind of, you know, sniper security on a rooftop. So it makes sense that if you're an expert sniper in the military, you go get a job being a sniper in the SWAT team. But what's also interesting is I had a number of phone calls with a variety of different police departments this morning. I put some of them onto X. People who are on X can follow me there at JG_CSTT. And I put some of the phone calls on X. There were two more phone calls that I didn't post for no reason other than they were unproductive and generally kind of boring. But in listening back to that guy now, what was notable about them is they were adamant, the other police department. So I spoke to the Butler County PD and the Butler Sheriff's Department, and the guy from the police department was adamant that they were never on the building, never on the roof. They were only in charge of, you know, parking, keeping track of parking, and they were not tasked with securing that building. They were not on the roof, nothing. And same thing with the sheriffs. They were very, like everybody who's having the finger pointed at them was pretty anxious to let me know that they had nothing to do with it. And there was somebody else I spoke to who just kept repeating that they provided whatever the Secret Service asked for them, like it was clear that that person had been given a script. But I think that's on there. That was that guy Snyder, I guess. Anyway, this guy saying, I don't want to say if we were or weren't in the building. I think it was them. And the thing that's weird is the Secret Service director said she was not aware of the guy with the gray suit. So it's pretty weird. I guess she's not watching the news. You would think if you're the director of something like the Secret Service and, you know, sort of like the biggest thing to ever happen to the Secret Service. So this is the anti-terrorist unit. It's rare to see them standing around chatting, doing nothing. Why are they guarding the bank? But we're getting DEI even in the anti-terrorist unit. People say, oh, that's racist. No, that woman was short and out of shape. Usually, the special response group are the toughest looking police you see. So I don't know what's going on over there. But you would think if you're the director of the Secret Service, you'd have some entry-level Secret Service person who's doing nothing but monitoring the internet, maybe have a room full of these people. Anything comes on the news, any witness testimony, any new information, you let me know. Why aren't they saying, hey, the internet is abuzz with a second shooter on the water tower, and, you know, here's this story about this guy with the gray suit. We have pictures of the guy with the gray suit. And here, the director of the Secret Service says she doesn't know anything about it. Well, maybe that's true. Maybe there's operators who are doing things that the Secret Service is told to deliberately turn a blind eye to. Don't know, we don't know. But I do not believe that we have a picture of crooks on the roof. In fact, I don't believe anything that we've been told about crooks. A lot of people in Congress, they were upset that conspiracy theories are taking hold. Now, some people in Congress, their idea of a conspiracy theory is people are saying that Donald Trump staged his own assassination. I agree, that's a stupid theory that is not based, I haven't seen any evidence. You'd need incredibly compelling evidence of that, like maybe a recording of Donald Trump saying this and him coming forward and saying, well, it's embarrassing, but yes, somebody secretly recorded that. I just don't see how, that could be. You need to question, you know, if anything exists, if that's your theory, and we could get into like a theoretical philosophy kind of existential conversation like that. But I think it's absurd to presume that Donald Trump planned this event. So that was half of the people's idea of a conspiracy theory, and then the other half of the people, I could tell that their idea of a conspiracy theory was that there's more than one shooter. Now, considering we're being lied to about just about everything, even the police are not even sure who it was that was on the roof. It took me all morning to sort of, you know, well, I should have just read the full Ron Johnson report, because this is also interesting. It's been released in screen captures mostly. The most widely seen elements of this Ron Johnson report are a screen capture version of it. And then I just went to the Ron Johnson website and got into the full PDF, read the whole thing, and it said in there that the Butler SWAT people. So that's when I called this guy, and then even there, getting to him, you know, it's bureaucracy, it's phone nonsense. It took a long time to find that guy. I'm curious to know what people think about his conversation with him. Something is wrong with this, I think. That was annoying. Bumped into, and the whole show ended. Let's see, are we still live? Sorry about that, everybody. It's treacherous doing this live show. See, there's something coming out of this new installation. Are we still live? I might have just lost everybody. What a nightmare this live stream has been. And then we've also just had a release here on X that Joe Biden's doctor has put out a letter. They're really trying to convince us that he's doing fine. Yeah, the static is killing me. Moderators don't start fights. I don't know what you mean about moderators starting fights. Anyway, what was I just talking about before we got Kevlar briefcase and umbrellas to obscure the view? What is with that? What is with this sound problem? This is amazing. Where is that coming from? Is someone following me? No. I just don't get it. Lots of buzzing. So she doesn't know. Secret Service lady doesn't know about the guy on the water tower. She didn't even know who the SWAT operators were. She couldn't tell. I remember watching it and thinking, how do I know more about what was going on with the local police than this woman who's supposed to be in charge of the Secret Service? She's definitely not going to last there, but I mean, this is just part of the obstruction. I just, people are saying things like, oh, how could Nancy Pelosi endorse? Somebody just texted me that Nancy Pelosi endorsed Joe Biden. This is a friend of mine from college who's freaking out. And yeah, I mean, obviously, Joe Biden, this rumor, they have to present him, or everyone's going to pretty soon start to realize that the rumor must be true. Because he could just tweet something, he could just make a video with his cell phone. You've got members of Congress straight out calling for proof of life on the President of the United States. That's crazy. We've never heard of that before. But I think he might be dead. Because he would just come on TV if he wasn't, right? I mean, the fact that they're playing all these games, it's just crazy. So, I mean, again, the answer to all these questions of like, why did this happen? Why did that happen? I think the broad answer to why is that everybody involved in this presumed that Donald Trump would be killed, and the focus would be, they'd do exactly what they're doing right now, except the John Cullens, the Jason Goodmans, the whoever is talking about things that they don't want people talking about, they would just say, oh, your Twitter account is locked and your YouTube account is full of disinformation, so we have to block it. And then you'd appeal it, and they'd say, what, huh? You got appeal here somewhere? We don't see that. They would just keep us off the internet. And then you say, oh, Jason, you're just saying that. Am I? I have a feeling they have some special bullshit plan every 4 years, because 4 years ago, it was that second generation CIA puke, most hated asshole, Adam Sharp. George's brother appears to be one of his henchmen. But what they did was they concocted a complicated plan to sue a false corporate entity that was named after a company that I used to own. And I believe they did this in order to trick me into thinking that I could be liable financially for a judgment against this thing, and to get me to hire an attorney. And they succeeded in doing that. The attorney, I've come to realize, was part of the plan, because he deceived me as well and ultimately put me in a terrible, terrible position in the case. And I lost. But the point is, the way they set that up was they took out 21st Century 3D. George's brother, I allege, sent an email to the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. This was on June 12th, 2020. The Academy waited until August 21st. No, forgive me. June 12th was when the show was produced. July 28th, he sent the email. I allege 6 weeks in between June 12th and July 28th were spent concocting and disseminating the plan. Getting Sharp involved, getting everybody necessary on board. But anyway, they calculated that to take Crowdsource the Truth off the air for 2.5 months before the election and for 2 weeks after the election. Why did they care about after the election? Why not just immediately complain to YouTube and take down Crowdsource the Truth? Well, by timing it in the way that they did, they made sure that I wouldn't be running my mouth on my biggest platform, 120,000 listener YouTube channel, talking about all the things they knew that I would figure out about Hunter Biden's stupid laptop and their idiotic stories surrounding this. This is the other important thing that came up at the hearing. Somebody said to Cheadle that, like, oh, why did you go to the RNC rather than whatever else he was thinking he should go to? And he said, isn't it true that you were scheduled to go to Aspen? And then at the last minute, you changed it to go to the RNC. And she said, no, she was scheduled to go to the RNC all along, only went to Aspen for 24 hours and then came back. And I don't know, but that sounds to me like the Aspen Institute, because she was going to speak at what this guy referred to as some kind of leftist conference. That's got to be the Aspen Institute, which are the same sinister fucking people who ran that Hunter Biden laptop simulation about a leak pertaining to Burisma 1 month before the New York Post released it. And the woman who ran it was Vivian Schiller. She took over Adam Sharp's job at Twitter. Forgive me, Adam took over her job after she left. So is this a network of highly sophisticated political operatives who permeate the whole entire executive structure of nonprofits like the Aspen Institute and the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences? I don't know. It looks like it is to me. And these disgusting people seem to always have their noses deeply inside of the most corrupt, criminal stuff that you could possibly imagine. And I'm dedicated to destroying each of them legally, using the law. I would never harm them, and nobody listening to me should take any action against any of these people. Be aware that even suggesting that on social media will cause them to cite that in legal documents and say, oh, Jason is inciting people to do stuff. No one should do anything to these people. I'm just educating everyone, sharing my personal opinions based on public domain information I've seen about these people, and letting everybody know what I intend to do in terms of exercising my rights and getting these people sued and hopefully recommended for criminal prosecution. But the point is, it seems like Cheadle was saying she was on her way to the Aspen Ideas Festival or some Aspen Institute event that seemed to be happening concurrent with the RNC. And I have a feeling that this assassination of Donald Trump was anticipated to be a huge media event, and they had all kinds of plans in place for what to do relative to the election once Donald Trump was dead. And thankfully, when that didn't occur, their plan, I don't know if they had a plan B. I don't think they did. And by the way, all the people who are saying like, oh, second shooter, third shooter, let me take you back for a moment, because either the other stupid thing that Cheadle said in that hearing was that she believes that Crooks acted alone. So I mean, you know, she should be charged with perjury, and actually for something specific that she said, which I don't recall at this exact moment. Luna actually requested that that be done, but she should be charged for perjury for essentially everything she said there. Because she's saying she thinks this guy acted alone. She's got to know that Crooks is not even the person photographed on the roof up there. What did people think about Detective Young's demeanor, his response to my questions? It's difficult to gauge if somebody in that type of position is being honest or dishonest, or, you know, there's just certain questions that are not appropriate for him to answer in the midst of an investigation like this with somebody on the other end of the phone who he doesn't know exactly who it is. But I don't know. Was that Madame Butterfly on the trombone? Oh, sorry. I'm curious, what did the chat think? Mitch Redmond says, "You are treating us the way the deep state treats Jason Goodman." I don't understand what that means. They're just suing me constantly and trying to convince everyone that the things I'm saying aren't true, but they don't ever seem to be able to present actual facts in support of any of those claims. They just say a bunch of stuff. Oh, what a cute dog. So yeah, there is a particular instigator in this thread. Huh. I'm looking at all messages. Who is that particular instigator? I believe George's brother has been blocked. Oh, I see. Is it Street Ghost who's creating problems for people? Yeah, don't create problems in the chat. That's not helpful. But to me, what I was getting at there is either you're like Kimberly Cheadle and you say, yeah, this is a 20-year-old kid who flew a drone. Nobody noticed that. By the way, these drones, they have GPS in them. All of the hardware and software is created by DJI. Someone out there is going to say, no, I made a drone with a flight controller from, I designed it and it doesn't this and that. And okay, fine. But the 20-year-old kid did not do that. And if he did, that's all he's doing. If you show me a 20-year-old kid who designs his own drones, I bet you he doesn't have time to do all that other stuff. But my point is, you're telling me DJI doesn't have a log of that somewhere? There's an app that you log in to fly those things. There's, the FAA doesn't have radar data. I guess a drone might be too small to appear on radar. And do they have transponders? They have tail numbers. I feel like there would be some form of record of a drone being flown in that area, and nobody has even asked anything about that. Everybody just says, oh my God, he flew a drone. So that's another one of these cases where, when you get evidence, even if it appeals to your bias or would serve to, prove some theory that you have, you gotta make sure, like a lot of people are sending videos to Cohen of some dude like doing the, what was that whole Irish, the water dance? There's like a guy up on top of the tank there dancing a jig. And I'm not saying that there isn't a guy on the water tower. There's 3 eyewitnesses who say there were, and I agree. There is some activity up there that we need better photographic evidence to evaluate. I just don't think that the videos that we've seen of the top of that water tower can distinctively show us a person. I've seen some videos that John and I have looked at that seem to have smoke, might have gunshots going up there. The eyewitness testimony to me was a big deal. I mean, 9 days. Could you imagine, just forget about the Secret Service for a second, if it was just the people that we're dealing with and crowdsource the truth, John Cullen and all the viewers and people on X who are sending information, just the group that we've been working with over the past 9 days and the shows that we've done, if you added to that only the fact that if I called that guy Patrick Young, the detective who's the head of the SWAT team, and I said, hey, this is Jason Goodman, I'm the head of the FBI, I'm the head of the Secret Service, I mean, you gotta tell me what it is that you know, you gotta send me the photographs in the phone. I think we might have solved this already. Because you see, what's gonna happen is, as I said to that guy, it's obviously a SWAT operator or a law enforcement responder who took that picture. It's not somebody standing far away with a super long zoom lens. That's a guy right on the roof. So that's going to be a limited number of people who took that. I already told them that the picture that's been presented, it wasn't released in any kind of official capacity. The other thing that they spoke about in the hearing is that the only people to do any press conference so far was local law enforcement. They had one on the day, and there hasn't been a single one since then. Congress told Cheadle, this is ridiculous, you should be having a press conference every single day, but they're not. So I think that whether Joe is alive or dead, the news that we're going to hear is that he's dead, because I think that what they've done now over the past 9 days is they're developing their plan B, which is the holy crap, there are certain people who are going to hang for this.
Yes, I think
and I guess they're making contingency plans to deal with that. So maybe Joe's first plan is just shuffle him off to Buffalo. Although, I mean, everybody can tell, looking at Joe Biden for the past several months, it was sort of obvious that he could drop dead at any moment, and nobody would be surprised by that in the least. So I don't know. Let's see if anything has happened with Joe while I've been on this walk. Doctors reveal why the decision was best for his health. Yeah, I mean, they're just giving you a lot of nonsense right now about what's going on with Joe Biden, writing letters, people questioning. Yeah, his White House physician has released a letter. This is not normal. Not normal, not good. And by the way, isn't the first week of the investigation, I mean, there's a serious lack of urgency on the part of the Secret Service. The FBI, the first thing they did was hose off the roof. Doesn't seem like, I don't know, that doesn't seem compatible with figuring out what's going on there. But by the way, the fact that she wouldn't say how many shell casings they found on the roof, they just know that if they say anything, then later they need to change the story. They're doing exactly what I anticipated. I think they put out that confusing picture with the conflated distinctive features of the ears to get everybody arguing about, is it Thomas Crooks? Is it Maxwell Urich? I think they want, it's like George was saying, that fog. They're putting out that fog because they have all the information behind a wall. They put up that fog. They see what theories come up, and they're going to want to go amplify theories that sound good but are totally wrong. They're going to want to amplify anybody who's like, oh yeah, Crooks, when Crooks was shooting from the roof, when Crooks, here's the angle from Crooks. Crooks takes the first shot. Crooks takes this shot. Crooks did that. The counter sniper shot Crooks. Nobody did anything to Crooks. I haven't seen anything. And then you had that other troll guy who released those videos where he's in his car. That guy looked an awful lot. That guy looked an awful lot like the longer hair version of Crooks, who they have photographs from like above on site. How did they get that photograph? And that photograph was released like Saturday or Sunday, like within hours of the event happening. So was it even long enough for people to look through all their photos and say like, oh, hey, I randomly, like a week later, somebody's like, oh, look at this. Here's a picture of a guy in a gray suit talking to the cops. But those pictures of Crooks with the long hair where we're looking down and he's like on a fence and there's grass around him and everything. Are we sure that's Crooks and not this guy who released these videos from in his car? Because it almost seems like there was a certain amount of media that they had ready at the outset. And see, I wasn't alive in 1963, but what I've read about the history, and I don't have the same sense of the timing of all this, but when it was decided that Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone nut shooter, you're going the wrong fucking way, idiot. Fatso! Guy's going the wrong way, headphones in his ear. What I'm getting at is, with Lee Harvey Oswald, they had this bizarre picture of him in his backyard holding a rifle and a Russian communist newspaper. And they said, oh, look, there he is with the rifle used to shoot Kennedy. And what people may not know is, similar to some of the ridiculous crap that we're hearing now, when this all went down in 1963, the cops came downstairs from the 6th floor of the book depository, famously holding up this rifle, but it was not a Mannlicher Carcano, the rifle that history records Lee Harvey Oswald as having used. That's the rifle that was found in the Payne's garage. Ruth Payne is the wife's name. That was on the tip of my tongue yesterday. But the cops found a Mauser on the 6th floor in the book depository. People who know about guns tell me a Mauser is a much more capable sniper rifle than the $9 Mannlicher Carcano. And Krasivo, Divichka. I guess that's a new Russian hair salon or something. I think those people understood what I said. It's krasiva, I think, means great or beautiful or something like that. So yeah, imagine this. Roscoe White and whoever else from the Dallas police, they go to all this trouble taking these pictures in the backyard And it's 1963, so photo compositing and retouching is super difficult to do. There's just not that many people who know how to do it, and development and this and that. It takes time. And they bring the photos and they say, wait a minute, you were supposed to hold a Mauser. What is this? Say, oh, it's a Mannlicher Carcano. It's the only rifle we had. Oh my God. So now they need to change the story. No, we didn't find a Mauser on the 6th floor of the book depository. We found a Mannlicher Carcano, and that became the story. But what I'm getting at is they had certain elements of media ready to go. This photograph was one of Oswald with the rifle in the backyard. Another thing they had was Oswald had appeared on some TV show. It was almost like a talk show where he's standing there and they're asking him about communism. He said, well, I am not a communist, I am a Marxist. And he's kind of very intelligent and articulate. If you haven't seen these videos of the archived films of Lee Harvey Oswald, and you just think that it's a conspiracy theory, then there's evidence and facts that you haven't seen that you're not aware of that might change your opinion. And what I'm getting at is I see certain analogs in this case where there were photographs of the wrong guy that got pushed out right away. Who leaked that photo to 4chan and why? And why didn't we get a lot of them? You're telling me you're on the roof, you only snap one picture? Wouldn't you take 5, 10 pictures of a dead guy like that? Why not put them all on 4chan? It just reeks to me, particularly now that Ron Johnson, and you know what? That Detective Young said, he's speaking to congressional investigators, so that might well be Ron Johnson. And by the way, everybody likes to think if I call up the cops and they won't say anything, the guy's got to be lying. Let's give him some credit. He might be very smart, and he might be aware that whoever is behind this sinister crime might send social engineers to screw that guy up, figure out what he knows, figure out what Ron Johnson knows, put some bad information down the pipe. Anyway, I'm getting that static again, so I'll be back tonight with John Cullen. If you're not a member, join us on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. There's something there on 7th Avenue that's doing that. Join us tonight at 7:30. You can become a member on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. That's the most economical way to support the show. This work would not be happening right now if it wasn't for the individual viewer sponsors out there who sponsor this show. I have no corporate sponsors. YouTube doesn't send me money. I make money when the individual viewer sponsors value this show sufficiently that they become members. If you don't want to do that, you can also just subscribe to Odyssey for free. It's become the largest repository of Crowdsource the Truth legacy videos on the internet. And for as little as $3 a month, you can sponsor the show on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. Huge thank you to everybody who's sponsoring on the other platforms as well. Subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Don't forget to follow me on X. There's been a ton of activity on X @JG_CSTT. Thanks everybody for watching. I hope Joe Biden is not dead. It would be better if he finishes his presidency and then the Democrats just lose and are embarrassed at the election. Stephen Briggs says this is all theater, Rand Paul, on both sides. Could be right. He could be right. I was not impressed with Republican members of Congress demonizing encryption. This is furthering the FBI's plan and the Valerie Caproni issue of going dark. They don't want you to have any encryption or any privacy in your communications, but even the director of the Secret Service admits in her personal communications with friends, she's using encrypted chat. Why would she do that? Thanks for watching, everybody.